The Game Awards 2024 nominations are out, and there's a lot of controversy around the inclusion of Elden Ring's DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree, as a main game nominee for Game of the Year. There's a whole wider conversation to be had here, but let's get to how the awards framed their decision in the first place. They recently updated their website to make a substantial change leading to this decision. Under the question, are DLCs, expansion packs, and remakes/remasters eligible for awards, it now reads, the Game Awards aims to recognize the best creative and technical work each year, irrespective of the format of that content's release. Expansion packs, new game seasons, DLCs, remakes, and remasters are eligible in all categories if the jury deems the new creative and technical work to be worthy of a nomination. Factors such as the newness of the content and its price/value should be taken into consideration. Now, this has blown up a lot on social media, the idea being that they're just giving away that Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is going to win Game of the Year. However, the flip side, to try and put some positive spin on it, even though I'm not in agreement with this overall, is that things like what Night Dive and Digital Eclipse are doing in regards to archival work on Tetris Forever or Llama Soft or whatever would then be in the running, so at least there's a level of appreciation there. Like, I don't think the Game Awards is some evil cabal of judges and organizers, and Jeff Keighley's the devil at the top of it, trying to, say that a remaster is Game of the Year, because just for the sake of it, I think in theory it's trying to reward all of the efforts put into an industry that is in itself an industry obsessed with remasters, remakes, looking backwards, etc. So I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, even though if Elden Ring, if a DLC wins actual Game of the Year, then what are we doing?
I understand why it's controversial, but obviously I like it. I do. I think, some of the expansions that we've had recently just outright have been better than fully priced games. Shadow of the Erdtree, in my opinion, it's practically a fully formed game. It's an expansion, but I think that would be in my personal top 10. It's 40 hours. Yes, it's practically, it's such high quality. It's 40 hours. It feels complete in and of itself. It has its own leveling systems, for God's sake. It's of course tied to Elden Ring, but it feels like its own distinct thing. I think if they sold it as a sequel or, as a spin-off perhaps, it would have been eligible, and I don't think anyone would have batted an eye. Same with Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty like last year. I think sometimes, and I think that's the key, right? It's not like this is going to mean that Shattered Space is in the contention for Game of the Year just because DLC and expansions are now allowed. I think, if anything, these expansions are going to have something working against them, because it's going to have that extra element of, well, why is this better than a full price game? Why is this better than a new release from this year? And it has to take something special to hit that mark, I think, anyway. So I think it's just a testament to the quality of expansions these days, and when you get them right, how substantial they can actually feel.
I think, I don't know, because I'm like, we already have categories for, best ongoing game, best DLC, best add-on, like different award shows handle them differently. So like, it is interesting going like, okay, if you're Jeff Keighley or your judges saying this expansion, this DLC is so good that it should be up there in the actual Game of the Year running, which in itself is an admission that the awards and the categories aren't equal, kind of thing, that we're saying that like a game, if it's nominated for best game of the year, is like worth more than best console game of the year or whatever it is, which we kind of are saying when we talk about those awards anyway. But it has sort of brought all that stuff into like a stark relief, where it is that the controversy is around the idea of qualifying something like Shadow of the Erdtree or the remake of Silent Hill 2 as a game of 2024 kind of thing, like a main game of 2024, which came back around, started coming around in 2017, back when we talked about it on our Game of the Year rankings, like the Crash Bandicoot trilogy being nominated for a Game of the Year spot, even though it's a remake of something fundamentally from the late 90s or the early 2000s. And I used to care a lot more about this stuff. I think ultimately it is worth just rewarding the work put in, but I do think if you're going to have an award show with categories, then those categories should matter. Like, what are we? There's not. I don't know if you're going to reward a best add-on. Then I mean, if you want to invent a new category, they've done that a few times over the last. Best adaptation was new last year. You could have a new premium add-on category or something where we are saying this is just as big, and you place it in the show right next to Game of the Year. But I think it's going to be a hard sell to try and get people to divorce Game of the Year, Game of 2024, to accept a remaster or remake kind of thing, when bulk of that game or that idea concept existed potentially decades prior.
I know what you mean. I mean, it's... I don't know. You know me, I think remakes especially are very valid. You know, Silent Hill 2, yeah, it takes the bones of the original, but it's a completely different game. You know, like, it's so different. Same with Resi 2 or Resi 4. Like, Resi 4 has more DNA with the original, but it is still its own thing, and I think is worthy of shouting out as its own thing because of just how much effort and how much tweaking and how many changes are put into it. I don't think... Even though this will obviously make stuff like, say, Shadows of the Damned Remastered eligible, I think, I don't know, I think the judges are smart enough to make the distinction, right? I don't think we're going to get pretty basic remasters like that vying for Game of the Year, even if it's something like, you know, The Last of Us Remastered. I don't think you would award The Last of Us Game of the Year in 2013 and then in 2014 put The Last of Us Remastered in because it's a great game. I think they are making that clear to me with the distinction between like the technical side of remasters and how much
effort
has gone into that
new
part.
stuff as well.
Yeah. So I get why it's controversial, but remind me. I know they have best ongoing game, but do they already have like an expansion / DLC?
I will have to look that
thing.
up. So looking back over last year's stuff, they had best ongoing game, but from last year's categories alone, they didn't have a best DLC or a best add-on. So for me, I would rather you granted that and then kept the best games of this year. Even though, as I say that, based on the way that they're framing it, that idea of recognizing the new technical work, the new creative work that was put in, Silent Hill 2 is almost the nexus of everything because, yes, like you said, the bones are from 2001, but there is so much work that has been put into that, and doesn't that team deserve to have their flowers as well, or be in the running? I think something like that. I wonder how much of this comes from the conversations around the way Capcom approached their remakes, because the RE remakes are so notably different. Obviously, less so RE4, but still. And then trying to be like, well, don't these teams matter? Doesn't this work matter? And then when you have another massive critical success, like Silent Hill 2 was massive in October, does that not sway everybody? How do we say that this is new work? You know, how do we? Where does that land, kind of thing?
It's tough, man, because I'm stumbling over my words because it's one that I'm trying to pass on my head as I go. Like, get the desire to have, say, a category just for DLC or expansions, or a category just for remakes and remasters, but I don't know if there's enough to justify it. Yeah, there are a lot of remasters especially, and a lot of remakes across the year, but I find a lot of them to be so different. Like I said, comparing Resident Evil 4 with Shadows of the Damned hella remastered, like you might get into a situation where there's a very clear winner anyway, you know? Because it's like, oh, well, obviously it's going to be that because of just how much work's gone into it, how well received it was or whatever. And I do like the idea that remakes especially, but then also big expansions can be classed as games of the year, because I think they're worth shouting out. I think Shadow of the Erdtree is worth shouting out alongside Dragon's Dogma 2 or Final Fantasy as being one of the not just defining games of the year, but outright best experiences that you can get.
I was going to say it's like best experience of the year.
Yeah,
I need some separate category for just like, when were you the happiest this year? Was it this? Right, we can shout that out. But I think it is an interesting conversation. Like I said, to me, it's more reflective of the industry, and that we are in an industry obsessed with reapproaching the past. And we did that whole video on remakes are out of control because there are like 8 different main ways to do this right now. And there's a huge difference between the way someone like Atari are doing it versus Capcom or whoever. So at some point that was going to be reflected in the awards. And we're also in an industry or a medium that, you know, how important are the awards overall? You know, how important are review scores? Like, there are conversations going on about all that stuff as well. What do you think about the importance of award shows? I love them, but I think the conversation around them is that people just go, well, if my favorite wasn't nominated, I don't really care.
That's it. I think I love award shows, but I don't deep them in a way that I think some people do. Same with like review scores. Like, I couldn't care less if someone gave a game that I like and think is a 9 out of 10, an 8 out of 10, or a 7 out of 10. Like, I don't know. Maybe when I was younger, I would care about that stuff way more. But I think that some of that discourse around review scores does make its way over to the award shows, where it almost feels to some people like it's like a personal attack if their thing doesn't win or their thing doesn't get nominated. And I think it's cool to be passionate about games. It's cool to be passionate about movies when it comes around to the Oscars and stuff. But I think you've got to have fun with it. You've got to remember that ultimately these awards are given out by just like a handful of very respected people, but it's just the opinion of someone else, and that doesn't invalidate your opinion. It doesn't mean that it's better than yours or whatever. It's like, it's just another opinion in the space, and I think that it's better to have more opinions in a space than limit that and just say, well, it's a travesty if this thing didn't win. Just take it with a grain of salt and have fun with it.
I mean, it will be a travesty if Final Fantasy VII Rebirth wins anything. So
Will it?
I do. I back that. I back the anger. I have my own pitchfork. I'm sharpening it right now.